Good. Well, welcome everyone to today's event, which is the latest in a series of webinars from the Open Group. Obviously coming to the end of the year, and this has been a very busy schedule, but looking forward to another good event today. Today's webinar is being brought to us by Biz Design, which is a very active member of the Open Group. And our speaker today is Rob Crozier from Biz Design. And before I hand over to Rob to start his presentation, just let me go over a few of the usual housekeeping issues to keep the event moving forward smoothly. Firstly, if you'd like to ask a question of Rob during the event, probably the best way to do that is to write your question into the text QA facility. I ask you, if you do write a question in there, that you address it to all participants. That everyone gets to see the questions that are being submitted. If you're just to make a comment or share a comment with a fellow attendee, then probably the best way to do it is use the text chat facility. And we will try and answer as many questions as we can at the end of Rob's presentation. This event is also being fully recorded, so if for any reason you have to leave early or if you experience any local technical difficulties, then a full recording will be available tomorrow, and everyone that's registered for today's event will get an email with the appropriate link where they access that recording. Know that people occasionally do experience some local audio problems, so if you do and you would like to join the audio conference, then you can do that. But as I said, this is being recorded, so you can always listen to it at a later date. Bob, if you're ready, can I ask you to start your presentation?
Thank you, Simon, for your introduction, and everybody to this webinar, which is titled Decide Today, Rule Tomorrow, which talks about integrating business rules in your enterprise architecture. Before I start, I want to tell you the webinar has a lot of content, so it's going to be quite fast, but as stated, you are able to recording and watch it back. We will also make available a copy of the slides in a PDF format via our website of Biz Design. At the end of the presentation, you will find all URLs also regarding some additional content. Today, I will start with a short introduction about myself and Biz Design. Then I'm going to talk about the basics of enterprise architecture with Argument TOGAF. The topic of business rules with TM, where T stands for the decision model, which is a method to model your business rules. And then the most important part of this webinar, the fourth button, how can we combine both worlds? So how do we integrate a business rules modeling approach in our EA approach, and how does TM relate to standards like Archimate and TOGAF, and how can we combine those three to make our enterprise architecture approach more effective. First, I'll introduce myself. My name is Rob Crozier. I'm an EA consultant at Biz Design, based in the Netherlands myself, and I work with clients that set up their enterprise architecture practice. And there's a lot of different organizations. I made a selection, for example, in Tata Steel Europe, Roche in Canada, currently at the Dutch Tax Office, and I did this kind of work in the other companies as well. Besides this work as a consultant, I'm also a trainer in Archimate, TOGAF, the decision model. So those three we're going to talk about today. I'm also a trainer in the tool we deliver ourselves, Biz Design Architect, and requirements management. If you have any questions after this webinar, you can also reach me via this email address, or you can follow me on Twitter. About Biz Design as a company, what do? We offer an integrated service offering. It consists most of the time of a combination of consulting services, tooling, training, and best practices on several topics. And the most important are stated here. We are very in enterprise architecture management, but also in business modeling, business process management, and also business rules management. And of course, those topics are also related to each other. So we're going to focus on the relation between enterprise architecture management and business rules management, and how they can be combined and enforce each other. We are present all over the world. We have clients and offices all over the world, in the Netherlands, but also offices in North America and some other countries in Europe. Parts of the world deal with partners, for example, in Mexico, Australia, and Portugal. So if you want to do business with us, you can find a location nearby almost everywhere. The introduction about myself and BIS design. I'm going to start with an introduction about enterprise architecture with Archimate and TOGAF, and that's the basics for this approach. And I first want to start with to discuss with you what is enterprise architecture about. And according to our view, enterprise architecture is a discipline with the objective of steering changes. So we want to move from a current situation to an improved target situation. And enterprise architecture is a framework that helps you to come to the target state. In two, architecture is about design the architecture. So the product side, a design that shows coherence between your architecture defined in business product processes, for example, but also your RT architecture, applications and data, infrastructure, your technical architecture. It's based on a vision and certain explicit starting points, which we can call architecture principles, for example. So the product side of enterprise architecture, creating those designs which describe the current and target state. But to use these enterprise architecture models and to make them work, we also need a process. Working. How are we going to set up an enterprise architecture? How are we going to develop it, maintain it, and which people are going to do it, and which other resources do we need? So more the way of working of enterprise architecture. This is where TOGAF comes in place as a standard. And for product side, Archimate is the open group standard which covers that side of enterprise architecture. In the end, you need both, because we can have a perfect design of our architecture, but if you don't have a process to implement it, it's not going to work. The other way around is also going to work. If we have a very process, but we don't have a good design of our architecture, then it's also the result is not the best. Both, and from the open group, that's Archimate TOGAF apply. So TOGAF more on the process enterprise architecture. It's a step-by-step framework which explains how you can set up an enterprise architecture. And Archimate as modeling language. So Archimate can be used to architectural designs and make them available to everyone who's interested. The interesting is that these two standards meet each other in the center. We'll talk about viewpoints, and which is a mechanism to communicate with the stakeholders about the enterprise architecture. So it talks about which kinds of designs we want to show to the stakeholders and able to be effective. Approach works really well also in practice. So at our clients we offer use a combination of those frameworks, so TOGAF for the process side and Archimate for the left side. A bit more in depth at the TOGAF, then the core of TOGAF is the architecture development method, the AM, which is visualized here on the left. I'm not going to discuss all the crop circles in detail. Our webinars do this in detail. But what's important here to know is that this method is and technology independent. It gathers a lot of practices and knowledge around the world and is available through the open group site. Use this for free in your own organization. Summarize the aim, then we see that the first two crop goals are more or less about getting the organization committed and involved. Um, so it's about getting the right stakeholders in place, also get a management buy-in, and through enterprise architecture initiative. If you look at this B, C, and D, that is more about getting the architecture right. So define the enterprise architecture in your current state models and in your target state models. So we're going to create models for business architecture, application architecture, data architecture, and technical architecture. E, F, and G of them is about making the architecture work. So we remain towards the projects which are going to implement parts of our enterprise architecture. We think about which work packages we have to define to target state. And in order, we have to execute these work packages. So about planning the roadmap towards target state. And this process, we need to keep it running and do this with architecture change management and requirements management as a activity of the TOGAF ADM. So process side of enterprise architecture. If we look at the product side of enterprise architecture, there the Archimate standard comes in place, which is in essence the only real language for enterprise architecture. It is a language which you can use to describe your enterprise architecture, all aspects. So it covers business, application, and technology, etc. Also, the relations between those layers, and that's very important to get one complete overview of all aspects and be able to do a more deep impact of change analysis. It's a graphic language with formal semantics, and it enables, and it's like I said, and it's supported by diff tools. Furthermore, it gives some techniques for visualization, so we find some viewpoints to be able to communicate with the various stakeholders. Also, Archimate standard is maintained by Open Group, and find more information on the website of Archimate or of the Open Group. On slide which you see the main concepts of Archimate. Please note that these are not all concepts of Archimate, but are the most used ones. And here also the framework of Archimate. So we see on the top the business layer, and in the middle the application layer and the technology layer. So here are elements like our business processes, our application services, applications, components, and infrastructure services, nodes and works. Further, we see on the right motivation, which is called the motivation extension in Archimate, which talks about the why question. Why do we model or target state in a certain way? It's because we have certain drivers and goals. And these end goals are related to the stakeholders. And these goals can be pulled down further in certain requirements. These motivational elements you can connect to elements of Archimate core, so elements from the business, application, or technology layer. Furthermore, on the bottom, the implementation and migration extension, which talks about work packages, plateaus, gaps, deliverables. So this is which concepts you can use to hit the roadmap we want to have to the current, to come from the current towards the target state. So that's about which elements of our enterprise architecture do we assign to which work package, so in which phase in time it's going to be implemented. And three elements, so the Archimate core, the Vision extension, and the implementation and migration extension, we can use Archimate, also viewed in the context of TOGAF. That's visualized in the right. The left, again, Archimate the TOGAF ADM. Right, we see the Archimate framework, and you see that the of Archimate, so the business application and technology layer, perfectly fine to phases B, C, and D of the TOGAF ADM. The activation extension of Archimate maps the preliminary, vision, and requirements management phase of the ADM. Please recall that in the motivation extension we have those kinds of elements like requirements, which are part of requirements management, goals, drivers, which are part of architect vision, and also goals, also parts of vision and your preliminary phase in TOGAF. See that phases E, F, and G towards the implementation and migration extension of Archimate. So where we talk about mission planning and implement governance, for example, we talk about the roadmap, and we think about the plateaus we need to define between current and target state. There we can use these concepts in Archimate. So in Archimate and TOGAF can perfectly work together, and I told it now in a very short time, but download the free wiper which discusses this combination of the two frameworks in more detail. The link can be found on this slide, and is all repeated at the end of this presentation. So this is a short introduction about with Archimate and TOGAF. Now we're going to have a look at the topic of business rules with the decision model. A lot of different terms are used in this working field. We talk about rules or rule management, business rule, business decision, decision models, and more. So first, it's important to get a grasp on what we are talking about and also what the decision model is talking about. And the definition of rule management is this one. The activity of managing and controlling rules derived from law and legalization. This focuses from the law perspective. Of course, one aspect, so rules which are in the law, and we need to follow, but we'll see that there is more if we look further into the definition of business rules. And also, rule management focuses on the specification, organization, and improvement, legalization, to facilitate efficient, agile, and consistent business operation. So it's about which rules are there from law and how do we implement those rules in our business, but still able to have an efficient and consistent operation. More definitions. So we see on the top the definition of the business rules group, which talks about that a business rule is a statement that defines or constrains certain aspects of an organization. In my opinion, it's quite broad. It gives insights. It is or constrains aspects, but what kind of aspects? It's not a clear definition. If we drill down a bit, then we come to the second. A rule is a guideline that determines the behavior of an organization. So this is a bit more insight. So a business rule is about what we do as an organization, how we act. So how to interact with the customer, for example, of how we interact internally. But the best definition, which also reflects the best how the decision model is used, is the third one. Business rules are the translation of, again, the law elements, legalization, but also business rules, business strategies or expertise, operational guidelines, obtaining a result. So we not only have the law element, but we also have our own business goal strategies we want to implement where certain rules apply. So we define also business rules because we think it's important in our business, or we have stated that in our own strategy. And these rules are also used on an operational level. So you'll see that we act differently, well, on the working floor, you can almost say. So when rules are also really transferred to the work floor. Why so important nowadays? Well, what you see is that these business logic, so the decisions that are taken, nowadays often are hard-coded, as we call it, and then in business processes. So coded, it means that they are implemented in legacy systems. They really are maybe even implemented in the programming code, so in these DNL statements, or in how we do our business, how do we execute our business processes. If they're visible and they are hidden or hard-coded, then this results in, well, invisible and maybe inefficient process and systems. We got to have the business rules behind it clear. We don't see them. It's difficult to respond to changing requirements which have an impact on the rules. So if, for example, changes, what do we need to change in our processes and systems? Which rules need to be changed there? If we don't, it's difficult to change them. Furthermore, it's hard to maintain, and, well, maybe there will be all kinds of errors in this hard implementation. The business rules out of the implementation or in the hard-coded implementation, and that's the rules approach. And, well, we call it separating the know from the flow. So knowledge of the business rules explicit, besides the way your processes and systems are working. Then decision patterns become more transparent. You can them and you can control them. Also, organization become more agile. You can respond faster to changes in the law environment or to change your own strategy. All inconsistencies become clear. So we have situations where our rules don't have one answer, for example. This is that we don't want to happen. The system perspective, you also insight in business rules to make a better test process of your implementation. We will also later on in the TDM approach, there's a bridge made between modeling of business rules and testing of business rules. And all handover of becomes easier. So advantages of getting insight in your business rules, but the question is, what is the good way of getting this insight, and how does it relate to enterprise architecture? Again, these advantages are not always filled. There is still a lot of confusion in definitions to what a business rule really is. Some business rules are specified very detailed. The most important one is the third one. The relation between business rules, processes, and information which is used there is unclear. And this is the link also between our enterprise architecture and rules can give an advantage. For all kinds of rule engines and those kinds of technical tools, what we mean here with lack of tool support and methodological support is about the analysis and modeling of business rules on a business level. There is still need for more, and there a TDM wide team is developed. What do we say? Context. We have some external legalization. We have strategy and policies. These can be combined, or they are in essence the rules we want to implement in our organization. And this all kinds of rules: rules people, rules processes, but also rules and applications. And the transfer of rules on the left side to implement them in processes and applications. This is where enterprise architecture needs to play a role. The present here is the decision model. Details about that. The model is developed by Barbara van Halle and Larry Goldberg of KI, Knowledge Partners International, and is described in detail in a book, which is called The Decision Model. You can download some white papers on their site, so the link can be found here. Since the decision model is model to describe the business logic behind the business decision. It's quite simple to create, to manage, and you can talk about the business rules with the business. It represents the business logic. So you can talk with it to the business, but it can also be used furthermore in the implementation process of systems, for example. It can be used to check logical constructions, and it can be executed in any technology. So it's not technology independent. You will see that decision model gives you the opportunity to also export your rules model into open rules format, which then can be also used in your technology environment in a rule engine. Decision model itself does not talk about specific rule engines which you need to use. How decision model looks like. So this is an example of a decision model view in which the notation that the decision model prescribes to describe your business rules. We will see in blue what's called a business decision. This example, we want to determine an approval status for a loan. Decision is based on all kinds of we called rule families. So all the elements are rule families. So the loan profile status is based on, for example, credit score, borrower credit risk, income payment ratio, and further on. But then such a rule family is based on what we call fact types. Basic types. So, for example, the monthly income to payment on the bottom is based on two basic fact types, monthly payment and monthly income. This variable, you can say, this fact type is used in other rule families to determine some values. This basic fact type is used in another rule family, then it's called a derived fact type. See that the monthly income to payment is transferred to the rule family above as a derived fact type. It's there to determine the income to payment ratio. All the families can be connected to each other with relations which are called inferential relations. Without going into too much detail, this is basic notation that the decision model uses to describe business rules and business rule families. Behind each rule family, the logic is described in these kinds of rule family tables. So, example, see that the borrower credit risk rule family has rules behind it. So, in this case, we have 6 rules which determine what the value of borrower credit risk is. So, for example, rule 1 says that if the credit score of this customer is high and if income payment ratio is adequate, then the credit risk is low. So in normal, if one always pays his debt and always has a good income, then we can give him a loan and his credit risk is low. If you're in the table, then you see that each situation is defined. So for each combination of facts, variables, the outcome of the borrower credit risk is defined. So a little table to determine the outcome of this rule family. Of all these rule families together determine in the end the outcome of the decision, determine loan approval status. Behind each rule family table, such a logical table can be found. Not all, because decision model notation. Furthermore, each fact type is defined in which is called a glossary. So, a kind of glossary in which we see that each fact type, for example, credit score, is defined to which domain it belongs. So, it's a string or an integer or real, or maybe you can define high, medium, and low for the credit, for example. And furthermore, it refers also to entity types and entity attributes. I will come back to that later. Are the key of the decision model notation. So we have the decision model view, then we have labels, and we have a glossary. If we have this decision model notation, how can we then integrate those two worlds? How can we integrate business rules and enterprise architecture, use the decision model, and argument and TOGAF? I want to go back to this picture. We have the context of business rules. We talk about strategy and policy. This is to the architecture vision phase, you could say, from the ADM. The people and processes on the right, in which rules apply, rules and decision rules. The business architecture in total ADM, which you talk about. And cadence on the right is the information systems architecture phase in the ADM. So in this diagram we see some AD phase of TOGAF plotted the aspects of the context of business rules. Still detail this a bit further, then you say that where business rules fit in, look like this. If you look at the TOGAF ADM, then business rules should be treated in business architecture phase. Because as architecture phase B of the TOGAF ADM, you normally create business process models, for example, business process architecture. If you really want to incorporate the thinking in business rules there, you need to explicitly consider the business rules as part of your business process models. Also, you need to define your what we call business rules objects. So your information objects which you want to use to define your business rules. And of course, then you need some business rules models as well. So the T models you saw earlier can be part of your business architecture phase. You have enough knowledge about the processes. In phase C, we can define a relation between my rules models and my data models. Maybe recall that in the glossary we have the two columns of entity type and entity attributes. They are of my data architecture, which certain rules refer to. Because rules are often need some kind of information, some data to make decision. See, you can make the relation between the business rules and which data they touch upon. Further, in phase D, you might want to think about which rule engine you want to use. This is not something that decision model covers, but is something that you can do as part of your EA. Where the decision model can be used furthermore is in phase G, in the implementation governance, because decision model gives you the opportunity to define test cases, so you can use those test cases in the implementation process. And also, the decision model can be exported to an open source format, which can be imported in a rule engine. So in the real implementation, the implemented processes and applications, the rule of TDM can be used as starting point. Furthermore, dealing with changes in regulations should be something that is taken care of in phase architecture change management. To give more insight in how this in practice works, are some examples of models which you create during several different phases, and how the architecture models can be linked towards the business rules models. So, example, we are now, you see on the top right, we are in phase B of the TOGAF ADM, and here a simple process model with business events, a business process, business objects, but we got a new concept here, a business set. So on top we have the claim admissibility rule set. Please note the diagram is an Archimate, so we make here the combination of TOGAF ADM phase B, we model process in Archimate, and add the business rule set concept, and applied here an Archimate extension mechanism. It allows you to extend the Archimate language to make specializations of standard concepts. In this we have specialized business object concept, which is standard of Archimate, by defining the business rule set concept by Archimate, and was also implemented in R2. So that at the determined claim admissibility, we not need some business object policy information and claim information, but a claim admissibility rule set applies. And rule set, if you then drill down on this rule set, there the decision model notation can be used to fully define the rule set, which is important here. So here that's such an rule set is in the decision model notation. So here again the blue sets for the decisions and the rule phase in green. For each rule phase, then again rule tables are defined. So for example on the left the claim admissibility depends on data correctness and payment behavior. So if data correctness and payment behavior is true, so our data is correct and the payment behavior is good, then we admit the claim. In a situation we do a provisional admissibility, and in another case the result no. See that in those tables you can also apply some terms like a bigger than or smaller than. Also some simple calculation rules or calculation elements can be part of these log tables. Also these elements should be part of phase B when you work on your business architecture. And we need to define a glossary. So this is that refers or is part of the example. So here are the different fact types and the definitions, the domains. And please here the columns at the right, entity type and entity attribute, those ones we use to connect towards the data model. Because this is the next step, now we move on to phase C in the TOGAF, which talks about application and data. I have an example of an Archimate view which covers the business objects and data objects. And we say that the policy and claim data objects in our architecture model are lead towards a complete data model in UML, for example. We have here an UML class policy, which are UML attributes. And on architecture level, we indicate which data objects are transferred to UML classes to start with. But then, furthermore, when we add CDM to it, we can also indicate in the glossary amount payable, for example, is this fact type refers to a certain entity attribute of my in UML. So in the glossary we link our type, which is used in my decision model, to an entity type claim, which is of my UML data model, and specify in detail to which entity attribute this one refers. In this case, the amount payable attribute object claim. Now we create a link not only from architecture to but from business model to data model to make the circle around. So, relation between a rules model in DM and our data model in UML. In total, this looks like this. So we define that we need a certain rule set to make a decision in a business process. We build this rule set in the DM model. As part of the DM model, we define the glossary. The glossary we link towards the relevant classes and attributes of UML data diagram. We also can link business and objects from architecture level all to my data model, and we make the circle complete. This we can do in this is B and C of the TOGAF ADM. Then move towards, I said something about testing. The model gives you also the opportunity to define test cases, and I'll show some slides how this works. Because on TDM model, so on your rules model, it can create these kinds of what we call test data templates. So in Excel, a test data template where we see again the simple fact types and the derived fact types. So the different fact types that apply to make decision. It can be used to define a test case. So you can add there data. So you can just add some values and some Boolean values, and then define certain test cases. Example, this is done here. See that we defined 3 test cases with different numbers, with different values for Booleans. At the start, at derived fact types, we state some expected values. So for case 1, we expect that the result will be yes of visibility. And for case 2, we expect provisional. And at test case 3, we expect no. Template, this built-in Excel template, can be automatically tested in my TDM model. So you can run this in your TDM model, and it will give you a result. And this looks like this. So the derived fact types, the actual derived values, on the bottom, you'll see that test is run. That results are ready, and immediately that some elements are colored in red, which means that there is a difference between the actual result and the expected result. So models, we expected for test 1 that the result would be yes, but in result, so if we real the TDM model when it's tested, the result is provisional. So here's the difference, and it would be us to have again a look at our models to see where something is going wrong. This is in our modeling phase, so why you see on the bottom right that it's still in phase B and C. Furthermore, this thinking in test cases and testing your business rules model can also be used furthermore in the architecture process when we go to implement solutions. Because business model is finalized, we export this in an open rules format, with and then be imported in other all rule engines. Again, DM is not linked toward a specific rule engine. It is technology independent, so it uses the open rules format to transfer to rule engines. Then via our rule engine, all those business rules are in the end implemented and executed. Then these cases we defined earlier can be used as part of a compliance assessment when we are in phase G of TOGAF ADM. G of the TOGAF ADM projects are really going to implement solutions, and TOGAF has the compliance assessment as a mechanism to an implementation is in line with the models we defined in phases B, C, and D. And these test cases, you can take them as part of your compliance assessment to see whether the rules are implemented in the way we would expect. So then the solution is that you take those tests as part of your compliance assessment to give an view of the implemented solution. So what we do here, what I call implementation independent modeling. So in the phases B, C, and D of TOGAF, we do the model work. We create Archimate models, UML models, TDM models. And in the implementation, phase G, applications are designed and built. So we have application code, database schemas, executable processes, and also executable rule specifications. So this is where the lead between implementation work is done. It's in phase G of the ADM. What are the advantages of this approach? If you business rules like this, it becomes an integral part of your enterprise architecture. So your decision patterns become more transparent. An explicit connection between processes, business rules, and data architecture. Give you insight in those relations, but gives you also the opportunity to do a more effective impact analysis. For example, when rules need to be adapted. Furthermore, the decision model framework is universal. It integrates with other standards, and it's, as I said, rule engine independent. We as design offer several to help you with. To start with is an integrated tool suite. In our architecture tool, we integrated the decision model, Archimate, and UML. So there creates, and all these links are integrated in one repository. So you can dive from what's your architecture towards your data model, and then again towards your decision model, all matched in one repository. Further consultancy on these topics, so on enterprise architecture, business rules, and the combination. Often we do workshops or kickstart projects start with these topics. For training. So trainings about the decision model itself, 2 days about the method, 1 day about the tool, or trainings toward Archimate and TOGAF. We offer all accredited training courses for those standards, including certification. Well, information. If you want to read more, then here's quite a lot of links you can try. Please have a look at our blog to see more blogs about TOGAF, Archimate, or TDM. Look at the open site for specifications of Archimate and TOGAF. I have on the right some links about the decision model and the decision modeler. Please download our free trial version or white paper. And some write more general information about BIS design. A copy slides is available through our website, so go to bisdesign.com/downloads and select webinars, and you can download the PDF, the slide deck. For your attention, and I think we have some time left for some questions.
Great, Rob. Thank you very much, and thank you for just reiterating where you can get the slides, because we obviously get quite a few requests for copies of people's slides. So, as Rob said, if you visit BIS Design's website, they have a really good download section there. You download these slides, and I think you can download slides from previous events run BIS Design in the open group. So, yeah, Rob, let's go on to some of the questions. Got a question here from Sudip. He's asking, business rule software is available today to implement the TDM model. Do you know of any business software available that could help with this, Rob?
Yeah, so, you can ask questions in 2 ways. So you can mean software which is used to create those models, so the TDM models. There are tools that offer those kind of functionality. We have our own tool which is called the decision modeler. If you talk more about the rule engine world, so import a result of a model in a rule engine. Yeah, there are a lot of rule engines used, and the decision is not linked to one specific rule engine. It uses the open rules format to be able to talk with all kinds of rule engines.
Thanks, Rob. Question here from Simon. I'll read this, quite a long one, but I'll read this out. Simon says, the example shown looks like a backward chain model. There is an objective calculating credit risk, and the chain back to facts, which may have to be derived from other facts in order to achieve the results. And he goes on, does it also handle forward chaining from business events that change data?
Yeah, a good question. Decision model notation thinks a bit from facts and fact types together from rule families, and the rule families together form decisions. When you connect this to your enterprise architecture and also a data model, so you link the elements of your decision model via the glossary to your data model, for example, you have the opportunity to also do more forward chaining analysis, because the glossary is just a list of all your fact types, basic and derived. And they can really link a certain fact type to a part of your data model. Also, because these data objects are part of your enterprise architecture, you can also indicate or ask a question from your architecture when a business event changes, which elements of the glossary it tracks to. And then you look into your decision model tree, this has an impact. So it's possible, but it's only possible when you extend the decision model notation with a link to your architecture and data model. So that's one of the advantages of the approach you saw here.
Thanks. Question here from Dole. Rules usually have a context in its application and a state of the object that it's being applied against. How account for a rule with context and object with its state in your model?
The state of an object, I think, is more when you talk about how rules are indeed executed in an application in the context there, in a time environment, because we do here, of what I presented here, is still in the design phase. So we are in the phases B and C of the TOGAF ADM. We are designing how it should work, and not on the detail that we modeled there already the state of an object. When we're going to build an application where rules are used, then in the detail there, it's there. Indeed, on this level, we didn't touch on that yet. So I think that's on a bit higher level yet, still.
Okay, question here from Meta. How do you manage a difference between a rules engine to simply guide analysis and implementation versus an executable rule engine?
Yeah, so the executable rule engine, this is something that would be implemented in when we talk in 3 of TOGAF. So decision model notation you saw here is still independent from an executable rule engine. So a decision model itself, I would not call myself a rule engine. It's really business rule modeling. So again, we call the slide which we call implementation independent modeling. So EDM and also Archimate is used to control the logic of your processes and rules. How it's implemented in an executable rule engine is question number 2, and Archimate decision model does not prescribe any solution there. focusing on open standards like the open rules format to talk with executable rule engines.
Okay, Rob, a question from Gabriel. I think he's asking for a little more detail about the specific implementations. He says, have got examples of production implementations going on. What was the level of detail you defined the rules at, and how many rules and decisions were implemented?
Yeah, we have examples of this, and what you see is that this number of decisions and rules can become quite large. And this when you need to manage this, you really need to have a central repository in when you can store all those rules and decisions. And because such a decision is always done in the context of a business process. So a good way is then you have in your repository and for each kind of structure that you organize the rules under a business process, and then you can say that in one business process maybe 5 or 10 decisions are taken. The numbers are sometimes there. So now, how many business processes are we executing? It can be maybe hundreds. So you talk about thousands of decisions. This can become quite a lot. But this is you need a central repository with good backup and linking facilities and version control to be able to manage that.
Okay, Rob, I think we've got time for a couple of more questions. Follow-up question from Simon here. Does EDM provide support for the creation of domain-specific languages or just decision tables?
I'm not sure what domain-specific languages is precisely meant in that question, but what here is the decision model notation. So in these logical tables, the operators are used there, and itself doesn't have another mechanism to the end describe the logic. So it is the notation we saw, which starts with these decisions and rule families, and then the logical tables. To fill logical tables, you have some freedom, but it is that. If you extend, then it's not more. It is more about that specific tooling has this implemented. So please note that the decision model itself is a way of thinking and a notation, and we've implemented the decision modeler, which gives some more advantages in linking towards other modeling languages, and make other tools have also possibilities to extend the decision model itself.
And I think we just one last question. I've got a question here. Let me just find from Mitesh. It says, how can business rules be laid out in a framework such that the regulatory changes for product and services make little or no impact to the business processes in an architecture framework?
That's a good question. If the business rules and link towards architecture and are going to be changed, it's more about then how do we create such an what level of detail and what do we really have as a variable defined in our decision model that can be changed and what not. And it is difficult to give a general answer to this. It really depends on the business context where you do this kind of work. Do we have a government organization which really is changing laws? We need to have maybe more flexibility in our rules model than when we are just an insurance company and we more or less always same decisions that are taken. So I find it difficult to give a general answer on that. Sorry.
That's great. Well, we've come to near enough to the end of our hour, so I think this would be a good point to draw today's event to a conclusion. Do you have any final comments, Rob, before we close?
Well, thanks for your attention and your interesting questions. Please visit our website if you want to know more or come in contact with us and download a copy of the slides via businessdesign.com/downloads and select webinars. That's, I think, for all now. That's
Rob. Well, I'd like to thank Rob for his time, and I'd like to thank everyone attended for your time. Please do keep an eye out on the Open Group website, because I think we're going to have a couple more events before the end of the year, but at this point I'll draw the gate to conclusion and say goodbye to everyone. Thank you much. Bye-bye.